Call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Director Hayes, would you please read our board priorities?
I'll be happy to. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support action programs and activities which reduce the impact of poverty on our students, their family, and our community.
Thank you. And Director Gosa, would you read our mission and vision statements, please?
The mission statement: enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. Vision statement: education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you very much. Move on to board reports. Are there any? Well, if there are none, I will comment on our graduation ceremonies recently. I think that all four of them were just amazing and outstanding. I think they were well, I don't want to say exactly choreographed, but planned by whoever was planning those. I know that a lot of work went into it, but there was, from my perspective, there was a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, excitement, and the weather in both cases, both meaning Mid-City, and which was at Ambrose, and the other three which were at iWireless. I thought the weather cooperated. Everybody was in great spirits. I just thought they were great events. I just wanted to comment on that. So thank you to the administration and everybody that participated in those great events. So I guess with that, we'll move on to communications. Director Mayfield, would you please read our upcoming events?
Thank you, sir. June 26, 6 p.m. regular meeting, ASC, Jim Hester Boardroom. June 28th, Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. information session on running for school board, ASC, Jim Hester Boardroom. July the 4th, Tuesday, holiday, closed. July the 5th, Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Committee of the Whole meeting, ASC, Jim Hester Boardroom. Day change due to the holiday. July the 10th, 6 p.m. regular meeting, ASC, Jim Hester Boardroom. Only one regular board meeting in July.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is open forum, and we have two open forum requests this evening. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at a board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. The Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibits action on any issue that is not on the agenda. And so I want to explain that just briefly, because you two are going to be presenting, and we have certain laws that we have to abide by, but you'll be able to make your presentation, but the board really won't be able to respond. Okay, so there will be a follow-up at some later date, but I don't want it to seem rude, but you'll make a presentation, and that'll be about it. And that's what I'm talking about there. The president will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. And this evening, we have two open forum requests, and I'm going to allow 3 minutes per request. First will be Laura Irish, and next will be Amanda Van Temsche. Amanda Van Temsche. So when you come up, you'll come up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and then go ahead and tell us what you want to tell us. So Laura, you're up first.
Hi, my name is Laura Irish. I live at 416 East Rushholme Street in Davenport. My daughter has attended Garfield Elementary School since kindergarten. My son starts 3rd grade at Garfield next year, and we have had a transfer request to Sudlow denied by the district, and we are very concerned about this and have sent letters, emails to Dr. Tate and a few other people. At this point, our letters and emails and phone calls are being ignored or not returned, not responded to. Our family has been a very big part of the community around Garfield and Sudlow. I was a long-term substitute for Garfield. We were told since our children started kindergarten that they would be going to Sudlow. Many of the field trips that they've gone on the past couple of years have been to Sudlow to view some of the things that they do on a day-to-day basis. And as a parent, I wasn't even told that we were not in the Sudlow district. The counselor at Garfield told my daughter, and then my daughter told me. Had the counselor not said anything, I probably would have not thought anything of it and attended everything for Sudlow and may not have even known until the first day of school or however we would have been informed. But to take students out of the community that they've been a part of for so long, and we've supported things at Sudlow, sports and art events and things like that, and to take 2 students, or however many students there are, 9 students, out of that community and place them in an area that they're not familiar with is very concerning to us as parents. And we would just like to have our transfer request reconsidered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Amanda?
Hi. As she said, I'm Amanda Van Temsche. My address is 2418 LeClaire Street, Davenport. As she said as well, my daughter has been at Garfield School since kindergarten and has been groomed for Sudlow. Everything that they have learned at Garfield has prepared them for the Sudlow transfer. Had we been told even 2 years ago, where we could have prepared our girls for this could be a totally different conversation. But this came totally out of the blue. They were originally in JB School District, which I had no issues with JB at all. We are literally a mile from Sudlow and now over 2 miles from Williams. So my child is now going to have to be bused from our area. We were going to make the best of this. My husband and I were convinced we're going to make the best of this. We're going to make this transition be just fine. After our first initial request was denied, we decided we're going to go 100% Williams. We'll get her prepared. We're going to fight as hard as we can to get her ready. Even though she's crushed, we've built a community around us, a community to help us with our child. My husband and I both work full-time, and we encourage after-school activities as much as possible. I think she needs to be involved in as much as she can be involved with, especially for our community, as well as for her spare time. I don't want her to have free time where her parents aren't home. I want her to be involved and be out. However, that makes it next to impossible for us to go and pick her up when we have to work all the way to Williams, because now she can't walk home. She could walk to a friend's house. She could walk, honestly, my brother lives right behind Sudlow. She could walk there and be in a safe environment and not be clear across town from us. I know it doesn't seem like a long distance, but 2 miles is a long distance when you're 10 years old. A mile is close. We also have friends that we have built in this community that will help us. We tag team. We can pick up each other's kids from different events. If I can't get off work, somebody else can. She's also joined the band. Her band director was heartbroken when he found out she wasn't going to be there. So we have groomed her to get ready for Sedlow. Then, now, we're going to Williams. We went to Williams, we did the orientation, we did all of that, and all we see are West High School lanyards. So not only are you sending my child now to Williams, then she's going to come back to Central and lose all of those friends and that community that we build at Williams. Not all of them, I will give you not all of them, but a lot of them are going to then go to a totally different school. To come back, to be reunited with her friends that she had to begin with, and that community we built from the beginning, but totally different school environment. I just don't think, and if it were 20 students, I would be okay. It's 9. We have 9 students out of Garfield going to Williams. So then we called and asked about the bus scheduling. How does the bus work? Because I needed to prepare her, and my time is up, I understand.
Yeah, I'm
But
going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
that's fine. We called about the bus scheduling. There isn't a bus stop in our area, and they were shocked that we were going to Williams. So I'm just asking for assistance in trying to be heard and get our concerns heard for all 9 students. I think all 9 students should have the option to choose where they need to be. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both, Laura and Amanda. It really is important that members of our community come forward and talk to us about these things. And we all appreciate you coming this evening. We really do. So thanks for being here. Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. May I have a motion? Seeing none.
I would make that motion.
Oh, all right. Hang on for a minute. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Snyder.
I would like to pull out 4.02 because I have a couple questions on it, please.
Okay, 4.02 has been taken off of the consent agenda. So right now, the consent agenda is including 4.01 and 4.03. And 4.02 will be considered after the vote on the consent agenda. Is there any additional discussion? Okay. Call for the vote on the consent agenda 4.01 and 4.03. Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion regarding 4.02, contract change order, $27,065.25.
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board approve the contract change order in the amount of $27,065.25.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Snyder.
I'm just curious, this is a change order for pouring concrete in the winter months. Why we're seeing that this late in the game?
Well, over the course of December, January, February, we were finishing up concrete work around the west side and up close to the auditorium. Some of that had to be done when the weather was not favorable, and so there's some extra work that has to be done in order to keep the concrete warm so it doesn't cure too quickly. And that's a contingent item in there in the contract. It's something that you don't know if you're going to do or not. So if you end up pouring concrete during winter conditions, there's some extra fees that are associated with doing that.
Okay, so this is something that even the contract, or the cement contractor wasn't planning on?
Well, we were planning on doing that particular concrete, we just weren't.
Didn't know when.
Didn't have control over when it would actually have to happen. And if it has to happen on days when it's below freezing, then you have to take extra care to prevent it from curing too fast.
Okay, thank you.
Any, Director Gosa?
So with this being delayed, being poured till it was colder, that didn't have anything to do with all of the mismanagement of our construction manager?
I have no idea. I don't understand the question.
I'm saying, since Russell Construction was supposed to be the construction manager managing the project, and it was behind, was this one of the things pushed behind?
This had to be done in a certain sequence.
Correct, but did the stuff that they let fall behind create this falling behind as well? It's just yes or no.
No.
Okay, that's all I needed.
Any other discussion? I have a question on the original document, not the change order. But I want to make sure the original, well, with the change order, the total amount is just about 3 million. It's 2.9 million for the concrete.
For all concrete work?
Right. And I don't know a lot about concrete. Is that maybe a normal amount? I mean, that's over 10% of the cost of the whole project, right?
Well, it's all the foundations, all the floor slabs. There's a swimming pool involved, which is a lot of additional concrete work. So I think that would account for why it's a larger percentage of the whole than it might otherwise be. But it's such a big building that foundations and slabs were a lot.
So I like rules of thumb. Would you say that a normal amount for concrete on a construction project could easily be normally 5% or so?
I wouldn't be able to hazard a guess.
You wouldn't?
And it would vary remarkably based on soil conditions because foundations
Mhm.
could be a lot more or a lot less.
Hmm.
And it could vary whether you had spread footing foundations or whether you had pile foundations, and we've got both in this case. But there are a lot of different variables that would make it difficult to have a rule of thumb.
Okay, very good. Any other discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote. And this is on the contract change order for $27,065.25. Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Kluel.
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. I have a motion regarding approval of bills.
Mr. President,
Director Kluel.
I recommend that the board approve the following resolution regarding the adoption of bills. The resolution is as follows. Resolved that all claims presented to the board, having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn in the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of May 18, 2017 through June 7, 2017, with the following voided check, and that being check number 347363, payable to Rhode Island Novelty in the amount of $342.95, reason being that was voided and replaced with a separate check.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, call for the vote. Director Kluel,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Mayfield,
Yes.
Director Gosa,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Move on to the superintendent report. Mr. Schnaden?
He left no report.
All right, then we will move on to other items requiring action. May I have a motion regarding the approval of plans for ASC JB Young Phase 3. Hang on a minute. For the design and specifications documents for parking lot and site improvements project.
Mr. President,
Director Cluel?
I move that the board approve the ASC to JB Young Phase 3 design and specification documents for parking lot and site improvements.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We will now hold a public hearing on the plans for the ASC at JB Phase 3 project. The notice was published in the Quad City Times on Friday, June 2nd, 2017. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, please step forward to the microphone. State your name and address for the record. Seeing and hearing none, I now declare the public hearing closed. Is there any additional discussion on this matter? Okay, call for the vote. Director Cluel?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Mayfield?
No.
Director Gosa?
Yes.
Director Hayes?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. I have a motion regarding approval of contract with School Administrators of Iowa.
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move that the board approve the contract with School Administrations of Iowa, SAI, in the amount of $53,466 for consulting services.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I just need a minute to get caught up here. Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes.
President
Oh, excuse
Johansson,
me?
couple
I'm
of
so-
questions.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Director Snyder.
I just had a question. It seems like this is involving our SAMs, and I'm curious what the consulting exactly is for.
So we partner with the School Administrators of Iowa, and they have somebody employed. They come out, they meet quarterly with our SAMs, and they talk about their data. So part of the service is each one of our administrators have a dashboard, and they set goals. And the SAM coach team comes out and says, okay, let's look at your goals. Are you meeting your goals? And they kind of make sure that they're implementing the key components of the SAM project. The other kind of big ticket item inside that contract are the shadow days. So I don't know if you've ever been out to a building and seen this happen before, but literally this person follows you around if you're the administrator for 3 to 5 days, depending on your level of experience. And they're this far away from you. And they write down everything you do every 2 minutes. They click what you were doing. So that's a true baseline data. And the only time they won't follow you is if you go into the bathroom. But they stand right outside the bathroom. And they literally, okay, you were in the bathroom, they check that stuff off too. So it gives you true data shots. And then that way your data can line up with that shadow visit, so to speak.
Wow, I almost feel bad for approving this.
And so the people that, like, for example, the past person, her name was Carol Linsing. She was a retired superintendent. I mean, great knowledge, good coaching. So,
Thank you, TJ.
Mr. Schnaden.
I was just going to have TJ add about the training piece with the state conference. That's included in this contract. Also.
so as a part of that, for example, Ken Williams, we went and saw Ken Williams. There's a day-long state training. that goes into it, and they're high-level speakers. For example, Paul Burnaby was the year before, but the live below the line or top 20 teachers, whatever that is. So it's a really high-quality professional development that's delivered by School Administrators of Iowa. And there's also some value in the windshield time that our administrators have when they get to ride up with their SAMs and talk about goals and setting and stuff like that. So.
Any other discussion? I just want to ask, is all of this worth it?
You know, Bill and I were just talking about that the other day. So the data that the administrators have is their data. And I've requested to see, but it's their data. So personally, I was a principal SAM team, and Bill was a principal SAM team. When this project is implemented with fidelity, the administrator is spending more of your time, twice as much, on instructional items. For example, my baseline data that came back from me at Monroe, I was spending 27% of my time on instruction. After that, my goal was 65% of my time. So that was my sweet spot. Instruction can be observing teachers, giving teachers feedback. That was my number one goal as a principal. But it also can be meeting with teacher teams, designing professional development, working in your office on professional development, those kinds of things, as long as it's towards instruction. So yes, it's very valuable. Every single day, the principal and the SAM, they sit down and the conversation looks like this. Did you get to everything on your calendar? You know what? I couldn't get to this one. I had to go do bus duty. So, okay, so I'll change that off. Did you get to Mr. Mayfield and give him the feedback that he needed to do? Yes, I did. I marked that off. So as the SAM is asking these questions, they're coding the entire day of the administrator. And that goes into that dashboard, that software system that they use. And then the SAM will say, well, it looks like you haven't gotten into Director Hayes' room in about 3 weeks. We're going to schedule in there, and then on the following day, I'll schedule in for a feedback session. So before the administrators leave every day, their day, the next day, is scheduled. And then the SAM is to protect that instructional time. Now, one of the things that you'll notice in our district is as our resources change, example, coaches, lead teachers, mentor teachers, and model teachers, 10 years ago, the principal was the one giving people feedback. Now the principal's orchestrating and making sure that all of those resources are being utilized. So it might have gone from teacher to direct feedback to the teacher as the number one goal or managing or organizing instructional meetings or organizing instructional resources, that kind of. So that might be the principal's goal. Inside that dashboard, every single one of your teachers is in there as well. So you can see how much time the principal is spending with individual teachers. And so that's what the coaching comes in, talks about, and they think, ooh, it looks like you've been spending a lot of time in this room. Yeah, there's a lot of behaviors in there, and I'm working with the teacher, yada, yada. So the process is extremely effective if followed to that T.
The data that goes into the dashboard, is that input by the consultants or by the SAMs?
Every day by the SAM.
And do they continue to input the data when the consultants are not available?
Absolutely. Yep, it's every day.
And so they're looking at it every day.
Every day.
And it's kind of like a self-measuring kind of thing. And they can set their own goals. I want to go to 65% from 27. That's my personal goal, and I've discussed it with whoever.
Yep.
I don't know. During non-consultant times, how do they get their guidelines?
So when the coach will show up and say, it looks like you're meeting your goal, looks like you're not meeting your goal, what's keeping you from meeting your goal? So in between there, they monitor themselves. And the process is only as good as you maintain it. So as a principal, there'd be 2 days where I didn't meet with my SAM, and I'm like, okay, we got to get in here. I kept my calendar. So what worked for me is I had a printed off calendar every day, and I wrote vigorous notes. Got to that, didn't get to this, and then that's what got inputted into the schedule every single day, inputted into the data system every day, because I wanted it to accurately reflect what I was doing. An example, I noticed that the month of December for these 2 weeks my data would begin to change for me because we're getting ready to go on break. This might be happening. We're wrapping this up. Report cards are here. Well, teachers don't want you. They need some space. They need some times at certain times of the year. So I noticed that my data would dip there. So I would do more data evaluation in there. Once the FAST data or the DIBBLES data would come in, I would evaluate that with groups. So I found ways to plug my time in as well. Also notice that you can turn lunchroom supervision into a green time. Hey, I got your scores here. Looks like you went up. Nice job, buddy. So that's a celebration. And so those are all green things that you can do. You find yourself taking normal routine things you do and infusing academic green. Because it's green. You're looking for green on your dashboard. So that's what we're talking about, like green items, so to speak. So it's self-monitoring, to answer your question. Sorry.
Okay,
That was a long
thank
way
you.
around it.
Well, self-monitoring, and of course, my mind goes to data collecting, meaning automatic data collecting, not people having to do it.
Yeah.
That's where I'm thinking, and eventually we'll get there, but thank you for everything you've presented. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director Hayes.
Yes.
Director Kluel.
Yes.
Director Gosa.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Mayfield. And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to discussion items. First is a review of community conversation meetings. John, you probably just as well come on up. We've had 2 community meetings, and both of those meetings were different. There were pros and cons, and so I'd like this to be a discussion about, are there things that we, the board, would like to see in these community meetings moving forward? And in fact, before we open it up to the board, John, why don't you explain just a little bit about the genesis and the development of those meetings? Give us a 2 or 3 minute
Absolutely.
review.
I believe it was February. I came before the committee of the whole and offered an opportunity to put you out in the community with the community to have a conversation. Dr. Tate and I had some conversation about that. At that committee of the whole meeting, we suggested a plan in which we would identify several opportunities that are in neighborhood school areas that would be appropriate for that kind of a conversation. We discussed 4 initially. One was the Fluellen Center over on East 12th Street. Another was 180 down on 6th and Marquette. Then we also had 2 others that we have yet to schedule, but can if you'd like, with United Neighbors, and then also with the Fairmount Pines, which is adjacent to Buchanan Elementary School. The intention here was to be very neighborhood-based, parent, community-based, and to meet people where they are and to listen to what they have to say about education in our community. We wanted to let them hear what your priorities are as a board and to be able to offer feedback on that and how they can engage with those priorities and how you can help them engage in those priorities. So that's what we set out to do. The first session being at the Fluellen Center was in mid-March, pretty well attended, and then the second session was at 180, I believe on May 3rd.
Okay, is that it?
Would you like any reflections on mine upon what I saw?
Why don't you wait until the board makes some comments?
Absolutely.
So I'd like some thoughts on, have these been effective, valuable? Should we continue them? Should we make any modifications to the approach that we're taking on this? So I'd like to open it up for discussion to the board. Director Kluel.
Well, I think, we started this when we were talking about our belief statements and what we felt that we strongly, what our core values were, what we wanted to do as board members. And one of the things that we said we wanted to do is to make sure that we were hearing from the community, and especially those people who wouldn't ordinarily talk to us, people that we would have to go out to, as John said, where they are. So I think this has been a good process. I guess in terms of a mid-course correction, and I'm glad that we brought this up for the board to look at, to say, how are we doing? Is this what we wanted to do? And I think John's take on it is that we wanted to hear from the community is exactly right, and I think to provide them with our priorities, I'll let them engage in that. I'm a little concerned personally that the board has been rather defensive. Administration has been somewhat defensive in hearing things that they're saying, well, no, that's not true. This is what we have going on. So it turned around, rather than a listening session, to an apology session, and then saying, no, you're not right. Don't you know we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing that. If that's the purpose of the meeting, that's fine. But I think that we set out to make this a listening session where we would listen to the community. And then what we have to do is we have to decide, okay, what will we do with this information? This has to come back to the board in some form. What do we do about the 2 African-American leaders who said, we chose not to live in Davenport partly because of the schools? What do we do with that information? So I am fully supportive of the 4 meetings that are set up, and I would like to see them crafted so that we can listen better, and if there's a point at which we want to talk back, that's fine, but I don't see that that is necessarily the direction that we wanted to go with these meetings. At least that's not what my feeling was when we went out. So I say let's continue. I think it's we're learning some good information. I don't know what we're going to do with some of this input we're getting, but it certainly will help us in terms of trying to decide how to chart the course for the future.
Thank you. Any other, Director Hayes?
I would like to also continue with the meetings. One thing I would like is more or sooner information out to the families, because the last meeting that we were at, the majority of the individuals were associated with the district, and there were a few people in the community that were there, and one lady was there. She was almost there by happenstance. She just happened to find out about it. So I would like more advertisement, and as Director Kluhl said, more listening by the board, not doing a lot of talking, because we are there to hear what their concerns are.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion?
Yes.
Director Mayfield.
I happened to be at one of those meetings. It's kind of interesting when we have community meetings. We can be at the very same meetings, but we hear differently as to what's being said. So I think, for one, it helps make it clear for me what others are hearing. Hopefully, John, that there's some type of report that could be written, because then you have something to look at, and I don't just have to assume what you heard, but at least you're saying what you heard, because what I hear may be different than what you hear, and if you're doing a report, it gives us at least a way of judging whether you heard the same thing that I did. Now, I don't know. I don't think you represent the entire administration, but I think you are, in a sense, heading it up. So what you hear is so important. And, of course, we have board members here, and maybe they agree with you or don't agree. But if we just assume, because there's nothing for us to actually look at that you've written up, then I'm making assumptions that you heard the same thing and seen the same thing and believe the same thing that I do. And that would help if we have a report. And I think those reports should go out to some of the people that were there, whether it be the director of one of the organizations, as to what type of feedback that you feel came from the community. Because without that, I think we're witnessing this right now, as to how two people, with our politics in the country, how two people can hear the very same thing and they don't hear the same thing. The words are the same, but the interpretation is different. Now, I was at those meetings and I know what I heard from people. And of course, I know what I hear when I'm not at those people, or not at those meetings. But I know that for sure that there are people that want change. Now, we all want change, but what are those changes? Do we agree or disagree what those changes are supposed to be? It's not really clear, because when I sit here at the table, we're talking about feeding people, giving them places to play so they can play basketball, recreation, and those things are good. There's nothing wrong with them. But our purpose is education, and whatever we need to do to make sure that all of our students have that great opportunity to achieve that. And I think what you were hearing from some of those people, whether they felt there was roadblocks there or not. And I think that's what we need to work on. Are we listening to the same thing? I mean, that's really what I'm saying. I don't know for sure, and it would help to clarify that if you write down, as a representative, of course, of the school district, as to what you heard, what you perceive to have heard. Are people happy with what their kids are getting? Are they not happy? Are they talking about the good things that are going on? Are they talking about the negative things that are going on? What can we do to change that? Are we doing to change that? Because from what I was hearing, most of the people at the meeting that I was at were concerned about the quality of education that their children were getting. Not whether they were across town, whether they were in the right school or not, whether their kids had good recreational opportunities. None of that stuff was discussed. What was discussed was the quality of education that their kids are getting, and that's the opportunity that they're looking for. So I think it would really clarify it for many folks if you were able to write a report as to what was heard, because I assume what you feel you heard, you're going to report it to other administrators, whether it's just verbally or whether it's written. And I think it's so important that others have an opportunity to see and understand what you perceived it to be.
Can I respond? Yeah, I did provide Mary with a very brief summary, bullet points of notes, but that was only shared with Mary, and I don't know where that goes after that. But I'd be happy to give you that information of what I reflected on the notes that I took for both those meetings. Happy to do it.
I, for one, but I think some of the other leaders in the community, they're the ones that need to hear it, because they're the ones that's dealing, should I say, on the front line, trying to affect change. So they need to support what you see and hear, so we can all move in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Mayfield. Director Snyder.
I was at both meetings, and I don't recall actually hearing board members speak a whole lot. Unless there was a question asked or something, but also the title is Community Conversation, so I guess if board members should be listening and not talking, and same as administrators, we should rename it Community Listening Meeting instead. So I guess just the title confuses me then.
Is that the end of your comments? Okay. Anybody else? Director Kluhl?
Well, I think that's something that we should resolve. Like Director Mayfield said, we're perhaps hearing different things, but when we did our belief statements, it was my understanding that we felt that we were not adequately listening to the public, and specifically those people who are not likely to talk to us, and reaching out and going out to where they were to listen in. That was what I heard from the board.
So this is one of the issues that, we're going to have to try to work through that this evening if we can. I put it down as a note for now. Any other discussion on the meetings themselves? I want to make a few comments. I did hear the board, and actually, probably even more than a board, some administration, that I think people want to tell their story, and so I don't see it as wrong. I think it's difficult to monitor, and it's difficult to stop talking. Heck, we've talked about that in our own board meetings, that some of us talk more than probably we should. But as I thought through it, I actually thought about trying to have John have a little bit more authority in facilitating the meeting, almost to the point of saying, Ralph, that's enough. Okay? Because we can go on and we can digress. So that's one issue. It's not to say yes or no on listening versus communicating, because as John laid out the original goals, it includes some of our responsibilities to inform the community, and maybe some of that could be done with some written things prior to. I don't know. Another thing that I think happened at one, and I appreciated both meetings, I really did. They were both significantly different. I thought both settings were really fascinating for a number of reasons. I've never been in either of those. I thought that they represented the community by being where they were. I do agree that we should do more advertising through the schools. It feels like most of the advertising was done through the organizations that we were meeting at. But a couple of questions came up, and I don't want to call them special interests, but they kind of were. And I think they tended to sidetrack us. And we got one of the questions that came up at 180 came up a few times during the meeting. And I think it sucked up a lot of time for the discussion. And Director Mayfield was talking about my interpretation in my notes is focusing on education. And I thought, yeah, you know, and maybe there's a little bit more of an outline, or so that we can help maintain a focus. And generally, I would hold you responsible for that, John. You know, I don't have any problem in helping to monitor, but I think between you and the person that's representing the organization, I think you two could generally do that, as long as you felt comfortable in especially holding board members and administration kind of to, hey, that's enough. We've got to continue to listen more, or here's our agenda, or whatever it is. I like the idea of the written report. I guess that's the end of my comments. Is there any additional discussion? There are two issues. One is John still wants to give us his comments, and we need to address this. How much do we talk? How much do we listen? But is there any other discussion of a general nature on this subject before we move forward with those two? Okay, John, why don't you give us your comments, and then we'll move into the discussion about where should we be on listening versus talking.
Very briefly, I think that what we saw, what we witnessed, what we heard at the Llewellyn Center was probably closer to what we had set out to accomplish, which was to have a listening session. The intimacy of the group, I think, was greater because it was people who were invested in the neighborhood and in the specific mission of the Llewellyn Center and the influence that they have in the community. And I think that Matt McDowell played a pretty significant role in helping facilitate some of that conversation as well. So I agree with your point about facilitation being a thing to focus on for future discussions, conversations, listening sessions, whatever we determine to call them. I'm comfortable doing that, but I think it's important to include the host in that as well. And Rusty Boroff at 180 was not comfortable in that role, so that was another reason why I think 180 kind of got away from us a little bit. It was very heavy, as Director Hayes mentioned, on district representation. We did do some promotion in the Title I buildings, particularly in Jefferson and Monroe. Transportation is always a challenge for those folks, but we can do better. We can do better to try to get those folks there. But I think Llewellyn was much closer to what we originally had set out to do.
That it for your comments?
I would also add that it is also an option, as opposed to a forum setting like we had at 180, where we're sitting in the famous Crumweedy Circle, and there's a good value in that. It is also an option to put you in a setting that is even a little less structured or more informal. We have a lot of really interesting events going on in a lot of our Title I buildings where parents are engaged and present. So you can consider that as an option as well. We could integrate that experience into an existing attracting event that would assure you that parents would actually be there, as opposed to the parents coming to you, you're coming to the parents. Now, whether that constitutes a community listening session with the board, if you're having a conversation with hot dog and lemonade, or whether you're actually in a structured forum setting, my opinion would be that 180 felt a little stilted and stifled because of that, whereas there just seemed to be a different kind of vibe at Llewellyn that I'd like to try to recreate.
Okay, thank you. So we'll continue with the discussion if there are additional items, or if you'd like to talk about should we be talking or listening, and I'd like some conversation on that. Director Kluhl, you brought it up. You want to talk? Oh, Director Hayes.
You know, when we listen to what's being said, there are going to be questions that, you know, to maintain transparency that we're going to have to answer. But, you know, as long as we briefly answer the question and go forward, I think that would be okay, because they're not wanting us to come to just sit and watch them, but just, you know, the abbreviated version just to answer the question.
Okay. Director Mayfield.
I think our community really would like to hear from the board members. Some of the board members they know, some they don't. But to get a board member's perspective, particularly to be able to verbalize what their perceptions are, is so important, because many times people cannot articulate that themselves. I think it's very important to give them that opportunity to do that. But if they need some encouragement, if they need some support, if they even need interpretation, because they're going to say either you're right or you're wrong when you do those things, I think it helps people versus, and I would like to think that we've all gained some trust from the community. I mean, without their support, it doesn't make any difference what we do. So when we're in these meetings, it is so essential that we be a part of it and not just sit there. I mean, sometimes I think people are very disappointed when they come here and they come up here, they have 2 minutes or 4 minutes, and they can say something, and then they walk away. They're very disappointed. They got no feedback, they got no reaction, and I understand the purpose and why we're doing that, because we don't want to introduce and dialogue back and forth, but that's the difference between a community meeting and a formal board meeting. I mean, we know why we don't do it here, but in the community, I think it's so important that we have that interaction between board members as well as community. I didn't say making commitments, but the discussion and explaining they want that interaction. Thank you.
Anything over here? Director Cluel.
Well, just trying to put together Director Hayes and Director Mayfield's thoughts, I would agree that if a constituent asks a question, has a question, that we should find a way to answer that question. I mean, we shouldn't deny them that opportunity. But I think about these two ladies that were here tonight for open forum, and I think, I don't think we caught them on the way out. But I was hoping one of the administrators would talk to them and say that we're going to look into this. I'm sorry that we failed to get back to you, if that's what happened. That concerns me too. But I see this session that the board said in our belief ideas that we want to listen to people better, that's exactly what it means. It's listening better, and it's hard to sit and listen to people's perceptions when they don't align with all the time and all the things that we have put our efforts towards here. And those things should be responded to shortly, briefly, not defensively. But somehow, yes, John, in your report, we have to have something at the end of this process, or even getting feedback as we're moving through, that we can look at and say, okay, here's what we've got. And I know that you're busy trying to moderate these things. Maybe we need somebody there just to take notes in addition to yourself, because I know it's busy enough trying to keep things on task. So maybe that's an idea that would be worth following through on, because I'm really hoping that there's a lot of good notes from those two meetings, because Ralph's got some notes there. I've got some notes somewhere too, but I would really like to have somebody with a solid set of notes. Otherwise, I'm going to feel as badly as we did with these two ladies here that came and talked, and so we got this stuff. So part of my learning was from the vision process. We went out to the community and tried to solicit from the community what it was that they wanted for Davenport schools. Now, we created that vision statement about 8 years ago. We knew that it was the board's vision statement, but we knew that it had to incorporate the community's input. So we started out with that process, and we started interjecting ourselves into the process and telling people, well, no, that's not quite right, that's not quite right. We learned through the process of meeting with 17 focus groups that we needed to just listen to what they had to say, and then we dealt with it as we came back, because our purpose was to write that statement. So we heard what they had to say, and that helped us to develop the statement. There was another time when we will come out and have to provide detailed information about what it is that we specifically are doing, what we believe, where we're going. So I agree with both of you. I just would abbreviate that talk back, because you're right, at 180 it was way overboard in terms of administration, trying to explain things to people who were very interested and listened very well. But I think there's a time for that, but I think this is the public's time to talk. Just like it's our time to talk here, this is our meeting. The public is invited to attend, and that's hard to understand that they can't input to it when they talk to us, but this is our meeting, this is their meeting. I'm using that kind of not in a legalistic sense, but just in terms of a contrast of giving the public an opportunity to speak their piece. Not, again, that we wouldn't speak back, because we had that opportunity, but for the most part, this is the public's opportunity to tell us what they think. But we definitely have to have that end point where we have solid information, the report that Clyde was talking about, that we can deal with this stuff.
Anything else? I tell you, I think the idea of a note taker is outstanding. There's so many things that I get involved with where it's really crucial to have that. And I think that facilitating a meeting is hard enough without trying to take notes. I don't know how you would do that, because the only time you could do it is in between times or afterwards. Yeah, we're all taking notes, but I think that having a note taker, however we can figure that out, be great. I think the report is great. I was thinking about maybe putting some written guidelines on the agenda so that it kind of reminds us to, when we respond, to be short, succinct, get to it, and try to get back, because I do think that there's the give and take, and that if we just don't respond, that's probably as bad as responding more than maybe we should. I really like the meetings. I think it is helpful to the community, and I think it's helpful to the board. I haven't really thought much about the administration's role in all of this. It feels more like a board and community meeting. I do have to think about the comments, Director Kluhl, that you made about whose meeting it is, because there are some legal aspects of it. And I really try to be careful. These are not board meetings in the sense that we call the meeting, and we try to be careful. We have checked it out with Lane and Waterman to make sure that it is all legal, and we are allowed there. We do have to be careful not to make decisions or move towards making decisions. I think Director Mayfield was talking about some of that. So it feels like the sense is, John, I mean, there's maybe a little consensus that we just got to be careful. But we want to probably try to listen more than talk, if we can. Your idea of a different forum, I don't know what to think about that. I don't really want to go and have cookies and Kool-Aid. If it's the right place, then that's the right place. But we had cookies and Kool-Aid at Fluellen. You know, there were snacks there, and that's great. I like getting into the community locations. I think both of those were great. I do think that, as Director Hayes said, maybe we just need to advertise a little bit more somehow. I don't know. Any other discussion? Any other thoughts, John, before we end this discussion?
John, as far as your thought of changing the meeting format to meet with title meetings or something, I think it's interesting. I know that you're a big proponent of breaking bread with people if you want to hear what they have to say. I think it's an interesting idea. I don't know how it would work.
And the comfort level of the participants, it's something to be wary of and considerate of and respectful of. Not everyone is comfortable in that circle forum.
Well, I'm just thinking, you know, some of the literature that we've read during our book studies is the African American community, how oftentimes I think of it in terms of early childhood and child care, is that African Americans tend to be much more relational in terms of child care, and that's why something we're going to be looking to with Early Childhood Iowa is looking at the difference between how cultures treat children. Because those can be roadblocks oftentimes. So I think it's more relational when you sit down with food. There's sharing. There's just a whole lot of good things, you know, that go on when you look across the table with somebody and you're eating the same bread. So it's an interesting thought. I don't know where you might go with that. Do you have plans for the next two taking place where?
Both organizations are willing. I would probably approach Fairmount Pines next if we wanted to go forward when school starts again, or at any time.
Sure, Director Mayfield.
I think the organizations that more or less we're going to participate with, I think it's very important that they support it in their community to get people to come out. I think, as you know, we have PTA meetings, we have at least once a quarter conferences. And those parents that probably need it most may not show up. But if you got an organization that's well connected in the community, they are going to be the force to get people to come to those meetings. And I think that's the perspective you sort of have to look from when you're trying to have a meeting and you want people to come. Who is the organization and who are they going to bring with that meeting? Whether it's LULAC, whether it's United Neighbors, whether the one you had there, I think look at those organizations and hopefully they can help support and bring people out. Because it's not an easy task to get people to come to any of these type of meetings. They're all leaving it to someone else. And if you want them to show up, we need somebody or an organization that's connected to them to bring them out.
People know, trust, and appreciate Matt McDowell in that way. So I think that's why someone with his reputation in the community is able to call on folks, and they trust it. They know it's going to be something meaningful if he's involved with it. So I think it's looking for those champions too within the organizations.
If I may say, you had a church there that's instrumental and involved in getting a lot of those people out there.
You bet.
So Matt does a very good job, but the church is a big pillar of that organization over there that brings people to be a part of it.
No question.
Okay, thank you. Any additional discussion? Okay, so John, hey, just briefly, I believe the consensus is continue. And so go ahead and make your plans. Maybe give us a little bit of your thoughts on what you heard tonight sometime.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to review of the board budget. So all of you have had a chance to look at the budget, and you see that the topic after this is membership in the ISB, UEN, and RSAI. And those are included as part of the budget recommendations. Superintendent Tate prepared this document that you see, and it's really just suggestions. As we had discussions about the budget, because the budget was getting to a point where the board couldn't do anything. The board would not have money to, and you know that we have stopped our dues to IASB. I forget what we had total available now, and I don't even recall, but with the reductions that we've had, and because of kind of the way that we've structured our budget, it's gotten to the point where it's been very, very difficult for the board to do some of these things. So what he prepared here is just some ideas. These are not 1, 2, or 3. We got to do this, that, or the other. This is to invite discussion. Where should the board be with respect to its budget? So I'd like to open it up to discussion. Director Snyder.
There's one line item on this that's missing, and it's a big one. It's our responsibility to publish
But wait till he talks about it.
yeah, I mean, it's not in there as far as like publishing minutes, publishing meetings, stuff like that.
No, I'll but I'll wait till you're done. Oh, okay. Yeah, one of the things I failed to mention is that the superintendent in reconsidering all this took out some items that they have appeared in our budget because that's where they appeared. And things like that are one of them, that the cost of that is the cost. It still goes against the district, whether it's a board budget, whether it's part of the district budget. So he assumed some of those responsibilities, like things about like minutes, and there are probably some others. In fact, Marcia, do you know where there's some other items that he took out? that we normally would have had responsibility for?
I believe it was the publications, the board minutes, and along with the public hearings that have to be held. So the majority of it was in that publication line item.
And I suspect, Mary, are there any others, like other newspaper or communications that we have to do besides those that were taken out, do you know? Or is that it? Okay, all right, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, all right, additional discussion. Director Klool.
Just to make a note on code number 320, you get on the bus. Last year, UEN funded half of our transportation costs and also the lunches. So we don't know if they'll continue to do that or not, but that is part of what we get out of our dues, which we'll talk about later.
Any other discussion? Well, I still want to get a sense of where we want to go as a board. One of the things that I would say about the UEN portion is that I think we were just fortunate in their being so generous, and that we should not count on their generosity as part of our budget.
Yeah, I agree. That was just a clarification on the line item.
Okay. Any thoughts on where we should be? Should we be at the ideal area, adequate, bare bones? Where does the board want to be? Director Gosa.
I would be good with not doing the ISB again. Didn't we take that out last year?
Yes. Yeah, and there's a discussion item coming up next
I'll wait
on
till
those three issues specifically. So you're talking about it from the perspective of the budget.
Right. That's a big, big number. $18,500. You take that out, you can do everything else at ideal.
No. Excuse me. I believe there's a misprint because the annual dues in the next discussion item is 11,800, not 18,100. Huh? That sounds incredibly high. We've got two numbers there. So I don't know if you can do a quick search on that. Yeah, if it's 18,000, then yeah. Okay. Any other discussion? I need a sense. I don't know where this is going to go, whether we end up voting on it at a future meeting. But Director Gosa is the only person that's indicated anything about where we should be in these areas. Director Snyder.
I'm kind of reluctant to say much of anything because most of what I want to talk about is focused on our next discussion item. So
Flip-flop them.
Well, I can go line by line, or at least on the big ones. Director Klool, I'm going to ask you, what about get on the bus? Should we continue to do that and fund it?
Well, I guess my question is, going from, what we've got here is we've got three different line items. We've got an ideal budget, an adequate budget, and a bare bones budget. And I guess the question is, what is the difference in the quality of education in the classroom for each of these three columns? What's the difference? Is there any? I think that's the question.
If that's the question, why don't you try and answer it?
Well, you've given me a challenge to answer it, and let me kind of speak about it a little bit. I guess funding both for early childhood and for K through 12 education has been at historic lows for 6 of the past 7 years. Your early childhood even longer than that. Iowa has had a very good reputation in terms of student achievement. Our Iowa test scores have been very good. NAEP scores have been top of the line, but they're starting to plateau, if not drop, while other states are continuing to grow. Iowa funds public education somewhere near less than 50% as well as the rest of the states in the nation. So there is an encroachment here in terms of what we're doing. Why did we close J.B. Young? We closed J.B. Young because of funding concerns. We didn't have the funding to keep that school in operation despite all the money and the effort that we put into it. It was actually a funding issue that caused us to close it. So is education in Davenport less because J.B. Young closed? Or is education better now that we've put those children with other students at other schools? I mean, they're not hanging out the windows. They're not at capacity. So is education better? Are we becoming more efficient with our resources as the state continues to fund us less and less? Is having our superintendent spend a full 25% of his time fundraising, is that causing us to have less value in the classroom? I would say that it does. I think a superintendent, and we talked about SAMs earlier, what SAMs do to allow principals to do what they're supposed to do. I would propose that, or I would suggest that our superintendent could be spending his time much more valuably in terms of quality education than going out and fundraising. Now, I think that what he's doing is the right thing given the situation we're in, because I think our Creative Arts Academy is one of the crown jewels in education. So I fully support what he's doing, but he shouldn't have to be doing that. But it's because of a lack of funding that he is doing those things. So yes, I think that each increment here I think we've gotten pretty much to the point where we can no longer do more with less. I think you can do more with less to a certain point. I think we've passed that point. And so, yes, I would say that each one of these increments going to the right towards bare bones is another decrease in the quality of education. If you look at number one, get on the bus trips. I think those trips have been exciting. I think that students have gotten a lot out of those trips. I think it has moved our legislature in terms of supporting, of seeing students and seeing their needs. It has helped students like Julie's son come out in terms of being advocates. Who knows what that process has done for Anthony DeSalvo and others that we've had. So yes, I believe there is an incremental loss in value of education each time we move to the right here. I will make that statement.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on this? Excuse me. Yes, Mary?
I'm not sure where you're seeing that there's two different amounts for ISB membership.
Where we're seeing it is in the board budget document that we have in front of us. It says dues IASB 18,500,
Right.
and then on the next page in the membership in IASB, which is the next discussion items, it says annual dues is 11,800.
Oh, okay.
So we have those two different amounts. We're just trying to reconcile that. Any other discussion on this? Where should we be as a board? Director Gosa.
Okay. So, board docs, obviously we need that. What are the board workshops?
Board workshops are things, so let me get back down to it. You're down here at 0322, right? It's ISB convention.
No. Consultants, board workshops.
Oh, consultants and board
0324.
workshops. Yeah.
Yep.
Right, and that's for an occasional consultant that the board may call in for any variety of workshops. I don't recall the last one that we've had, but we've had a few of them.
Okay.
We had Mary Jane Venz out at Credit Island.
Right, right. It's been a while ago, I think. Okay. And then what is the travel out of the district IASB deal? I think we should have talked about the other one first and then
Other
did
what?
this.
Well, it doesn't matter. We're,
Just saying because we would discuss the IASB, the UEN, and the rural schools, and then you would kind of know where you were at for the budget part of it.
okay, but we are where we are.
I get
So-
you.
So, the travel out of the district, which number is that?
That would be 582.
All right, so it indicates the IASB, for instance, that's a convention held in Des
Right,
Moines.
right.
Okay. And Secretary of Professional Development. So we have that responsibility also. And the Secretary has attended, I think you went to some board docs training, things like that.
Right. So my point with that being, okay, so I would be totally okay with not doing IASB again, and then that would reflect on the cost in that, because then you wouldn't have the travel out of the district cost for that. That's why I'm saying it's kind of hard to say what to do without knowing about the other. I mean, postage, I don't know what all stuff we mail out, but you gotta have that. Office supplies, you have to have that. Grad attire, they graduate every year, so you gotta have that.
No, you don't.
Well,
It's an assumption.
Right, but let's let him talk and then I'll come back. Okay.
and then you got ISB convention, so we don't know about that. The dues, don't know about that. The travel out of district expense, don't know about that one either. And the get on the bus trip, I'm okay with that one. I would think that you might be able to fundraise for that one too, though. I'm sure you could probably raise a ton of money doing that. And that's where I was at with it.
All right, Director Cluey, you want to respond
Yeah,
to
it was
those?
just the assumptions. I mean, we always have graduation attire, so we assume that we always need it. And nothing says that you can't go up there with a suit and tie.
What about shorts and a Hawaiian shirt?
Well, you can do that too. Some of the kids do.
Right?
So it's just, there's a lot of things we could do that would break tradition.
Anything else? Director Snyder.
Well, if you're looking for direction, I would say I'm hovering the adequate line with a little bit of playing with the numbers as far as 810 and 322 go.
Okay. Anybody else? Director Hayes.
Actually, I think you could probably add 582 to that also for IASB numbers. And I question the postage with $75 actually. I would probably change that 75 to 90. And that graduation attire, 618. I could probably, we actually tried to purchase our own books, but that didn't work out well. And we had talked about going to maybe articles or something that there was no cost for. So I could think that could probably be even less than 1,500. But everything else I'm okay with.
Okay. Any other discussion? So I'll go ahead and weigh in. I think that I'm probably between ideal and adequate. I think that the board dedicates and volunteers hundreds of hours each per year to, I believe, improving student achievement. And I think that the time thinking, the time debating, the time doing all these things is really important. I think that the get on the bus is important. I believe that consultants, my goodness, $400. If we need a consultant to come in, that might cover one consultant a year. That's not very much. Annual dues for board docs, phew, we went through a tough time getting board docs. We used to get those documents, and some of us remember that. We would get a packet like that delivered to our house every single week. And there was a committee of the board that looked at what should we do. They decided on board docs. I think you decided on these too, didn't you? The committee? And so we have a lot of this which provides us with, I believe, a ton of benefit. It's hard for me to imagine, again, going back to a business perspective, I think that that's almost crucial. We could say, yeah, the heck with board docs, the heck with our computers. Maybe we sell these off for $50 a piece or something, and we make, $300, and we go back to board packets. But I would not advocate that. I think that professional development and postage, I'm not going to quibble over $70 or whatever. Travel and professional development, I'll tell you what, I made the decision on professional development for our secretary because I believed it was the correct thing to do. And I know that we're challenged with our budget, but I believe that professional development is really important. The travel out of the district for the IASB, just for a board member. Now, a lot of board members will travel to Des Moines and back and not charge the expense for the mileage for going over there, not charge maybe for a meal. But it's legitimate expense, and I believe that it's a learning experience. It's an opportunity to visit with other people that know what's going on. I believe that some of the best training that Director Kluhl and I have received have been from the IASB. And it was years ago, but by golly, it was great. And going over there and attending some of the conferences, learning new things, you know, we can sit here and think we know it all, but I think we don't know it all. The graduation attire, yeah, it's an expense, and we could go ahead and say no. Another idea is that we could just buy our own. But I'm tempted not to get the board members so wrapped up that they have to spend a bunch of their own money on top of spending their own time. The dues we're going to discuss here in a minute, and the ISB convention and workshops and registration, I believe too that it's, whether we're a member of ISB or not, that the workshops can be valuable and we can attend without being members. It's just that it costs us a little bit more. So I'm going to be somewhere between ideal and adequate. So I don't know exactly how we'll put all this together. We will try to put it together based on everything that the board has said. Is there any other discussion on this item of board budget before we move to the membership dues? Mary, yeah, you want to tell us what you found?
That is a typo. It is 11,000.
Okay, all right. So the IASB dues are 11,800. So that would be 11,800. That'd be 18, 19, 3, be around 20 grand or so for dues for UEN, ISB, and RSAI. Is that about right, Marcia? Did I do my math right?
That sounds close.
Okay. All right. So around 20 grand if we did them all, and something less if we did less. Okay, any other discussion? All right, we'll move on to the membership dues. So you see the membership dues there for the 3 organizations that we have participated in over the years. We will be voting on this. I don't know if it's at the next meeting. Did we set it up? So, like some discussion, where does the board want to be in participation for these? Oh, and let me ask you, Marcia, the UEN, is that the one you depend on that to some extent?
I depend on ISFIS, which is the Larry Siegel, Margaret Buckton organization, and my budget pays for the membership in that.
And how much is that?
I can't tell you offhand.
You don't know. So the ISFIS is paid for by you, by the district, and yet we all are benefited by that. And what are the benefits for you?
I get the majority of information, research. They come out with, they're kind of ahead of the curve when there's things coming from the state. They'll interpret it for us. Usually during the school year, we have weekly webinars that we sit in on, and they'll present most of the recent topics, things that are changing, what's happening across the state. Larry and Margaret obviously will do consulting for us as a part of that membership. They have, it's pretty much mirrors the IASB in that they'll give us templates for policies that maybe we don't have in place. They give us a lot of the financial spreadsheets and informations where we can do projections and get historical information. Again, what IASB would give us. So it pretty much mirrors the same services that we got from IASB, except that we can get it from ISFIS and we can get it cheaper.
Okay, thank you. Let's have some discussion on the 3 associations that we're talking about here. Any thoughts? Director Cool.
Just a comment. I know Art is always appreciative of what UAN provides in terms of the job alike groups for other folks in administration.
Okay, anything else? Director Hayes.
I think we went with UAN last year or this year and not the IASB, and I'm okay with that, and the Rural School Advocates.
Just to clarify, when you said "and the rural school
Right.
advocates,"
Both of them, the 2 of them.
meaning eliminate?
No, I don't
which
want to
ones?
eliminate. I think if I had a choice, it would be the UEN, then second RSAI.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify. Director Gosa, you were talking about all this earlier. What are you thinking?
I thought you already knew where I stood. I would dump the ISB again and go with the UEN and RSAI.
Okay. Director Mayfield, I'm going to ask you, and I'll ask you, Director Snyder, and Kluel. I want to see where you guys are. Director Mayfield.
Well, I know that we, as far as the budget is concerned, we're in a crunch. But I think when we deny ourselves knowledge and people that have the information that can help us make better sense of what we're doing, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Now, we can minimize it down to a couple things, and we can live with it. But is there essential information that we need, and are we harming ourselves by denying what we need? I'm sure you're more aware of the budget as it started out when it was 50,000. I don't know if it ever went as high as 70 or 80 or 100,000. I have no idea of that history. But as you keep minimizing it, I think the most harm that we're doing to ourselves is lack of information. So I think you ought to keep that in mind as we keep thinking that we're helping ourselves by cutting the board's budget, because there's not a whole lot else that we spend money on for the board, except for the knowledge that we need to make the proper decisions. So we can cut it down to nothing. But what harm are we doing to that information flow that we need? You know, we like to pride ourselves on being knowledgeable. How do you get that knowledge? Where does it come from? By trial and error, or by being able to use others' experience? That's what joining these organizations, that's the difference. So we can probably cut it to the bare bones, but I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We need to find a way to include that operating expense that's so important to the knowledge that's needed to make our district better. And if we're minimizing that, we're also minimizing our knowledge that we need. So I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate your comments, and we can accept your comments for what they are. Are you going to comment at all on the 3 different organizations? Okay. Okay.
Those that have more experience.
Okay.
To use that judgment as to what's needed.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Director Snyder.
Well, from what I've seen, one of the biggest things we get out of the UEN is leadership from Margaret Buckton. We also attain that through the RSAI. I would be fine with just the RSAI and not the IASB and not the UEN.
Okay. Thank you, Director Kluhl.
It's interesting when you say you would be fine. I mean, I know you're not fine. You would like to continue to be involved with all 3 of these organizations, but for the funding. So again, you know, what is the loss? What is the value of these organizations to education in the district? You know, I'm thinking if you could take away something, it would be the caps and gowns for graduation. I don't think that probably would affect the quality of education in the classroom. But well, you've already heard me talk about the Iowa Association of School Boards. It hurts me to leave them. Again, I was a board member with that organization, and I know the good work that they do. But I think it's so many decisions we make are kind of like minor Sophie's Choice decisions, and I think rural schools, certainly we clearly get everything that we put into it in terms of dues we get back. Urban Education Network, again, I know that we can't count on continued good graces of Lou Finch to provide the large part of support for Get on the Bus, but they have. So I think that we have to make decisions, and I would support UEN and RSAI membership for the coming year.
Okay. Thank you. And a couple of things. I do think ISFIS was kind of born out of some of the difficulties that occurred in IASB. And Margaret and Larry, I think, got kicked out of IASB.
Larry too.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes, there was a lot that went on there. You're right, call it a dysfunctional situation for instance.
Yeah. And they had worked for IASB for a long time. They had provided a lot of benefit, but I think that when they were, and if I've mischaracterized it, set me straight, but I believe that they were kicked out of IASB for a number of reasons. And so they formed ISFIS, and I believe in ISFIS. I believe that they're offering a lot of benefit, as Marcia had indicated. Are RSAI, interesting because RSAI actually has a dues program that would allow us to have $0 of dues right now if we wanted to. The superintendent has advocated that we go ahead and spend the $750, and I think that's appropriate. We could take advantage of their generosity to go to 0, but gosh, I think they are doing a lot of good work, and I think especially their advocacy for equality and equity with respect to per pupil student funding and or spending and transportation costs are making a difference in the state. And so I think it's been a great relationship that we've had with them. I was thinking about associate membership in the UEN. I think the UEN has associate memberships, right?
They do, and they have criteria for associate membership of which we don't.
Oh, I understand, but I sent a note to Lou suggesting at one point that we were considering not participating in the UEN, and I'd say he pretty much blew a gasket in his response to me, because we are charter members, we are leaders, we are all these things. And then with IASB, I too, and again, in business, you can do things. You can barter, you can negotiate. You can say, well, your price is too high, but I'll give you this much. And when we've tried that with the IASB, they say, no, our deal is our deal, and we aren't going to make any special deals for Davenport. Generally, I support what Director Mayfield was talking about, is that we do need knowledge. I think that we get enough through UEN and RSAI and ISFIS. And so I would generally support not participating again in IASB. I would support strongly participation with RSAI. And UEN, I'm somewhat ambivalent. So I guess that kind of sets the stage for an upcoming vote. We'll have a vote on each one of these coming up probably at the next regular board meeting. Director Kluhl.
Yeah, I just want to take the opportunity to talk about IASB as an organization. Most of you don't have a lot of familiarity with it. A good organization that has provided us many good services over the years. And it is true that they had problems. They actually, during the year that I was on board, they hired a CEO who went before the House and Senate Ethics Committee, and she had committed crimes. And it was very unfortunate that that person was in place. The board and the organization of IASB is solid. They served a good purpose. They continue to serve a good purpose. And such things as their general sessions, what's that committee that Ken is on? School board, no, what? Legislative Resolutions Committee. Very effective organization. They do a lot with our legislature. They have active lobbyists that do things on our behalf, and they'll continue to do that despite our not being members. But I just wanted to stand up for the IASB as an organization that has done a lot for the state of Iowa, a lot for our students, a lot for Davenport students. The work that they did of the Leadership Academy that President Johansson talked about changed the direction, I think, of this board. So 4 of us that went changed things incredibly. So a good organization that had an unfortunate hiring experience, but they are back on track and doing good things for the students of the state of Iowa. Just wanted to make that clear.
I appreciate your remarks, and I want to say too that I have a lot of confidence in their leadership now and in their financial wherewithal. I don't know a lot about their educational offerings anymore, but one of the things that was hammered, I think, to me, is that we need an organization like the IASB to represent all school districts in the state. And that is one thing that the UEN does not do, RSAI does not do. And so those two organizations are representing different subgroups of districts in the state. One is really big and one is generally rural and usually pretty small. The IASB has helped with some of the legislative resolutions committee issues, but also some of the legislative issues that we've worked with. Again, equality and equity, they have worked on that. And so I generally support the IASB, but in our specific situation, I'm willing to not spend the money. And that's part of the dilemma with inadequate funding, I think is how you put it earlier to me. And I would say that if the state gave us adequate funding, then it would be a lot easier to pay for that.
And that's just the way I would like to leave it with the board, is that in future years when funding is different than it is now, that you will certainly reconsider joining this group, because we will all be stronger together.
Okay, great. Any other discussion on this issue? All right, we will continue. We're a little bit behind schedule. Are there any administrative reports? Okay. I don't have any board requests here. Are there any board requests? Okay. Then I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I would provide that motion.
Okay. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.